And now, without further ado, let's get into the crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. And look who it is, Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Just hanging in there. First of all, I want to start off this show by saying RIP to the Oakland A's and the Coliseum. Just got to give a quick shout out to them. I feel it's a big enough story to even get a shout on our show. But shouts to them. John Fisher, you stinky winky. Man, I'm excited to be here, man, to talk about real baseball teams. You know what I mean? Real baseball teams that have ownership that usually does something and doesn't just, sit on their butts and buy extra yachts or whatever rich people do. So really excited about this, man. Last season, last series of the regular season. And honestly, what's crazy is it's an important series potentially.
Yeah.
There's actually some weight to this. Don't get me wrong, the Padres have clinched the playoffs, but even still, there's some importance here. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all that importance, but I actually want to start, Javi, on the point you just made. We're here. It's the finale. Man. It's the end of the regular season. Just how does it feel to finally get to the final regular season series of the year?
It's so funny, the ebbs and flows of a baseball season where you start off you're locked in every day. I'm joining your fantasy baseball league. I'm like, yeah, let's draft. Then you go through a little bit of a dull side or whatever.
Who won?
Yeah. By the way, for those who don't know, Millard Thomas has some sort of very odd hex, like a dark magic hex with cosmic entities following him. I have never seen anyone genuinely in my life, with maybe the exception of my one friend who won our fantasy football league 3 years in a row, pull off the nonsense that this man's pulled. Even in other sports, fantasy football, he had the least points scored in our league and won that year, and I had the second most, and I didn't make the playoffs. There's something going on with this man. I don't know what it is.
I'm locked on, baby. But let me not distract you, Javi. Let's get back to your point. How does it feel? I know you want to lament in my championship, but how does it feel to be here finally?
Look, it feels pretty good. You go through the ebbs and flows of it, and especially for I guess on the Padres side of things, it was a lot of thrill. I mean, the Padres aren't they're never going to be a awful team to watch because there still are stars. The same thing was the case last year, even though they underperformed and it drove me to the brink. You still had stuff to watch for. You still had hope and whatnot, and that's what happens when you have good ownership and good GM and all that stuff. But this Padres team was very inconsistent to start, but they did have some fun moments. The Chicago Cubs come back, stuff along that line, and then everything just ended up clicking later. And for me, that's when it really went into full overdrive. And I feel like once you get to that point in the season, you're right near the deadline, you get a little bit tired, the deadline picks you up. And from that point on, it depends if you're good. If you're good or if you're buying whatever it is, then you can still care for lack of a better word. That doesn't mean that if you're a seller, it's over, as we've seen with the Detroit Tigers, who decided to win 28 games in a row or whatever, right? So it's not always over, but that's kind of the point where you're like, all right, do I have to care about this anymore? And thankfully for the Padres, yes, they did. They've been one of the best teams of baseball in the second half, one of the best teams in baseball in general. And I think both of our teams had really interesting deadlines. I mean, the D-backs kind of they just didn't sell, I think was the big thing with them, right? They didn't trade away Christian Walker. They didn't say, oh, everybody's hurt. And they want to run. And it looks like they are still vying for a playoff spot. So, really long season as always. Some might even say too long, but I've enjoyed it on the Padres side of things. And honestly, I feel like we could even talk generally, if we wanted to, if we have time, about, I think this is a pretty great baseball season. Low key, just not a lot of parity, no runaway favorite team, some astonishing records, right? From Shohei Ohtani to the Padres comeback wins to Jurickson Profar going from the worst to greatest player bat in the sport, despite it being year 10 of him figuring this out. The Jose Ramirez thing with the Guardians, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, and Bobby Witt having, if you're a nerd out there, having the best F-WAR season by a shortstop in Major League Baseball history. Genuinely, a lot of good stuff this year. I feel like stars came out to perform. It's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, on a macro level, I think the parity that you just hit on is huge because when you look at this MLB season as a whole, you don't have that one team that won 105 games and dominated the regular
Mhm.
season and have that plus 200 run differential. Like your team right now in battle to potentially win the division, win the NL West. I mean, the NL East, I mean, the Phillies have dominated the whole year, but the rest of that division between the Mets and the Braves have been super close. You look at what's happening in the AL wild card race right now. The Orioles were at one point division leaders for a majority of the season. Like there's been a lot of parity with the teams at the top. It's been very close. And I think for the first time in a while, like, is there really a true favorite when you look at this MLB season? Like, I look at the American League, it's like
Yeah.
Yankees, Astros, and then it's like kind of thin after that. And then I think in the National League, there's like 5, 6 teams that you can make an argument and a case for going to the World Series. So like I think there's so much parity right now when you look across the sport, like you mentioned.
And I think every team, even the good ones, even the top tier ones, your Dodgers, your Phillies, your Yankees, they all had really bad stretches or at least something bad for them. Padres were really inconsistent at the beginning of the year. Yankees had one of the worst months of any team in the sport this year when it became what everyone feared, where it was just Judge and Soto. You had the Guardians, who started off really strong and they still are a very quality team, but they had a lot of injuries and Stephen Kwan fell off and whatnot. The Astros, yeah, they're leading their division, but it's a weaker Astros team that we're used to. The Phillies, they had a really bad month and they kind of limped over the second half of the season despite being so dominant. The Brewers are just, I don't know, the Brewers. And then the Dodgers, just, they had a lot of injuries and they've been recent with guys like Tyler Glass now, guys like Walker Buehler, guys like Clayton Kershaw. Like every team, it's been parity, and it's also been like every team has almost been humbled in a way, very weirdly. Like it really has been a true grind. And like you said, no clear favorite. I guess if you had to pick one, it's the Phillies technically, right?
Yeah.
But it's just one of those years where, as always, anything could happen in the postseason, but it especially feels so this year. Where like I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers are riding high and they just somehow make it to the ALCS, or at least make a really competitive fight for the ALCS bid. So we're gonna have to see how it all shakes out, man. It is very
Yeah.
exciting.
I think the Phillies are probably the choice right now if you had to pick
Mhm.
a team to win it all because of what you just said, where it's just so much easier to make the cases for the other teams as to why they aren't going to go all the way. When you look at that Dodgers rotation and Glass now making, one more start than his career high and then his season ends, Yamamoto coming back, he's looking a
Mhm.
little shaky. Like the Yankees, little top heavy. Like if a Judge or a Soto goes down, like what happens to the rest of the team? So I think there's like obvious flaws with a lot of these top teams outside of the Phillies, who you look up and down that roster from the rotation to the lineup to the bullpen. Like everyone is kind of just having a great season. So it's definitely feeling like it's Phillies versus the rest of the competition right now in Major League Baseball. And I want to ask you, Javi, about the importance of our series coming up
Mhm.
in segment number 2 here on our Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover. But this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly want to learn more about with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during postseason. Maybe it's time to test your baseball's competition stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you, no matter what team you're rooting for in the postseason. Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. That means D-backs fans, even San Diego and Los Angeles, you can even be a fan of with Booking.com. So go book your accommodations today on Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover, and we got a upcoming weekend series between our two teams, but the Padres still not exactly locked into seeding yet. Got a game tonight against the Dodgers. Is the NL West division is still on the line tonight with a potential Padres win?
Yeah. It's the ideal. The Padres really probably needed a sweep. In
Mhm.
this series, it's still possible if they were to win the second. If they were to win the series, 2 out of 3 of them win this last game by the time this podcast is happening will have seen that. And then they would unfortunately need the Dodgers to like really blow it against the Rockies. And while the Padres have to play the D-backs, who are still fighting, in their own playoff contention. So it's very, very unlikely. They really needed a sweep. But bottom line is we got them scared for a minute, man. And as people may have heard this week, that little postseason clinching triple play was quite the sight to behold.
That was
So
nice.
yeah, that was just one of those things where I was like, man, Millard, I'm so close to saying that like no matter what happens in the postseason, I'm good. Because this season's just been so
Wow.
ridiculous. Like
Okay.
they threw a no-hitter not too long ago, and I almost forgot about that. I think a lot of people forget about that. It's like, yeah, they threw a no-hitter like 2 weeks ago. So just absolute madness in that regard. But yeah, and then depending on how this series goes, if the Dodgers were to drop, let's say 1 or 2 games, and then the Padres were to sweep, or if the Dodgers dropped all 3 and the Padres got 2, maybe we'd have something in there because I know that like they own the series against the Dodgers. I'm pretty sure. I think they're like 8-4 against them this year, so maybe that would be in their kind of purview. But we'll see, man. And I know that this postseason picture, man. I know you must be checking every day. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I'm checking the what other teams are. I'm checking the Mets and Braves. I got to make sure that if my team blows it, we don't get kicked out. I know it must be really nerve wracking.
Well, that kind of leads to my next question, Javi, because like you just said, it's a lot of variables, a lot of stuff that has to happen and go the Padres' way for them to take the division. And so basically, you're kind of locked into where you are already, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of if you win tonight, still your chances of winning the division are very low. So I want to ask you, why not look at this weekend series like your bye? You're not going to win the
Mhm.
division. You're not going to get top 2 seeds. So let's make sure we rest our players this upcoming weekend series. We might face each other next week as well, right? You don't want to give anything away this upcoming weekend series. D-backs desperate for their playoff lives right now. They need this weekend series. How about the Padres? Do the D-backs a solid. Take, this series off. Rest Tatis, rest Machado, rest the Ceases, rest your guys. Let the D-backs get in. Don't
Yeah.
show anything to your opponent that you might face next week. And then let's gear up Monday or Tuesday whenever we have to face off in the wild card round. Let's
I
make it happen.
That's good stuff, man. First of all,
Okay.
I just want to say you really sold me. That was great. And hey, as someone who's a fan of a certain football team that should have, you know, pulled out all the stops so that we could have got the tie, we could have made the postseason. I understand the vibe of what we're going for here.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a chance you see a version of that. I could see that, particularly with the pitching. This weekend we're seeing that it's Martin Perez, Yu Darvish, and Michael King expected to be the 3 starters. I think that Martin Perez will pitch, and I think Yu Darvish will pitch. I think that there is value in Darvish just kind of coming off the IL somewhat recently. He had his personal stint as well. So maybe him going out there and just pitching as playoff competition. And also he's a work ethic freak. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's like, no, I'm pitching. I got to get back into the zone. You know what I mean? Get back into my
Mhm.
routine even more because he is very particular and kind of notorious for how much he works at his craft and how much he really has a steady routine. Martin Perez, I think, is the perfect type of pitcher that like makes sense for them to use right now. And then Michael King, I think, could affect the D-backs. Depending on how this shakes up, if they're no longer playing for anything, Michael King is expected to be the Sunday starter. If they aren't playing for anything, not only has Michael King just been unbelievable, probably the best overall pitcher for the Padres this year from the
Ooh.
Juan Soto trade. I think that if they're not playing for anything, Michael King has never thrown this many innings before. So I would not be surprised, D-backs fans, to see him be pulled. I think Perez and Darvish will make their starts. I think. I'm pretty certain it will be Perez. But I'm like 98% sure that it's Darvish. I'm 100% sure that if the Padres are not in it, I don't think you see Michael King on Sunday. I think they say, we'll give him a little bit of a rest, get him revved up for the playoffs, and the rest is from there. Because again, he has not pitched this many innings before. He's never been a full-time starter to this degree before. If you just look at his time with the Yankees.
Well, that puts a lot of pressure then on Merrill Kelly to deliver in game number 1 so we can knock the Padres out and just lock them into their seating so we don't have to see Michael King on Sunday, because if the D-backs lose game number 1 and Michael King is still slated to go Sunday, D-backs next 2 starters will be Jordan Montgomery and Erod, and they have been shaky to say the least this season. So I do
Mm.
not want to see those 2 guys in 2 pivotal matchups for the D-backs postseason hopes and, hopes to stay alive in the playoff race. I do not want to see those guys. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But Let's play out a scenario, Javi, where the Padres lose tonight, and now you got the D-backs 3 games back of the Padres, but still a chance with a sweep to move ahead of them in the standings and host the wild card round. Is that something that like matters to you? Do you care about hosting the wild card round, knowing you probably don't have an opportunity to go on the road again come the postseason if you don't make it out of there?
I feel like we've talked about this before. Just like the decreasing relevance of a home field advantage, I think is something that people have talked about a lot. But yeah, man, I still kind of want it because the Petco Park, as it's been shown many times, goes absolutely bananas with this team. They're still top 5 in its fan attendance this year, and they go even more nuts for the playoffs. You saw 2 years ago when they beat the Dodgers, with their home crowd, everybody absolutely going nuts. So I could see like there be a preference in hosting. Although frankly, my bigger preference is who they're playing. If it started today. And by today, I mean by the time everybody's watched this, it will be a day from what I'm about to say, that the Mets are going to be the team apparently that they'd be matched up with. And if they were to win that, they'd play the Dodgers, and the D-backs would get to play the Brewers. So kind of basically the same thing as last year. And frankly, that makes me really sad because I kind of like the Mets and I hate the Brewers, and you guys are going to sweep them again. And everyone's going to be like, oh, the Brewers. Yeah, I love every year. Every year, nobody sees it. Everybody year, they're like, wait, what happened?
Javi, I gotta say, I love this because I've been on an anti-Brewers like agenda last month. Anytime I've done a crossover with someone and they even mention the Brewers being good, I'm like, hey, let's relax. They're good.
One
in the
of
regular
us.
season.
One of us.
Yeah.
One of
I'm
us.
like,
One of us.
we know what's gonna happen in the playoff, guys.
They were an American League team the last time they made the World Series, and y'all want to talk snap because you have regular season success, regular season merchants, Millard. Let me tell you, regular season merchants, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't understand there. I don't understand the love for the Brewers. I know on paper, good pitching, good all this, but I can't see Colin Reyes starting game 2 of a playoff game. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but just
and no
throwing that
Christian
out there.
Yelich either, and no Christian Yelich.
No
So
Christian Yelich, very shaky stuff. And I actually do want to ask
them again.
you.
I'm gonna be so mad if you guys sweep them again.
I
I'm just like, this is stupid.
And yeah, we're gonna talk about the scariest matchups in segment number 3. But I will say, as a little preview, I will be gracious if we can bring on the Brewers once again in the postseason. I will be looking forward to that matchup if it does happen. So that is a little preview for segment number 3 as we talk about the teams who have the most to lose if they miss out on the postseason and the scariest matchups for the D-backs and Padres in the playoffs in segment number 3. But hey, if you love playing daily fantasy sports, then I suggest using PrizePicks because PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the sports action in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And also, if you're thinking about doing any investing this season, then the app you need to use, of course, is going to be Robinhood. Now, if only I can find my Robinhood overlay for the YouTube audience. Where the hell is it? It's got to be somewhere. It's got to be somewhere. Did someone delete it? Seriously, did it get deleted? I don't know where it's at. Okay.
Well, Robinhood, we love Robinhood still,
Well, we'll
regardless.
still talk about Robinhood, but I bet my people over there would love the little overlay. Don't know where that's at. So sorry, Robinhood. I thought we had it. Maybe hold on. We'll take a quick pause, and we'll come right back. Coming back here. Apologies to Robinhood. Don't know where your overlay is. Don't know if we're still using that. But regardless, if you're trying to invest this upcoming season, then I suggest using Robinhood, of course. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. We call that the Javier Reyes boost. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product specific disclosures. Visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right, back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, the Locked On Padres crossover, and we were just talking about it a minute ago. But Javi, I want to get your official take. If you had to face Mets, D-backs, Braves, or Brewers in the first round of the postseason, how would you rank those four teams?
So Mets, Braves, D-backs, Brewers.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think that when we're talking postseason, I like to incorporate vibes a little bit because it does become such a crapshoot. I think that the Braves. So number 4 for me in terms of least scary is the Brewers, as always. Until I'm proven otherwise, just a zero aura franchise. You know what I mean? So I need to be proven otherwise. The Braves putting number 3 feels wrong. It just does. I don't know what it is, but the Braves, I don't like how much their whole team underperformed this year. And don't get me wrong, I understand. Like, we've seen the baseball playoffs before. It would be so peak Braves for them to come in there. It'd just be so annoying if they did that. But I don't like that literally every player outside Marcell Ozuna, for the most part, I'm sure I'm missing one, has underperformed. Then I'd put D-backs too, only because I'm going to tell you why. Dumb reasoning. I'm going to go by the process of how sports work. Usually when you go far one year, you don't go quite as far the next year. That's all. That's literally my main reasoning. And also just because I think that it would have been better for them to have seen Eduardo Rodriguez and Jordan Montgomery like kind of in their usual form before entering the postseason. The same way the Padres have that problem with Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, but they have shown it recently where it's like they look like they're back. We haven't seen for sure that those two are back, so I'm going to put them second for those reasons. And number 1 would be the Mets, which unfortunately the Padres may be slated to play. They've got this aura to them. The fact that Francisco Lindor, my king, basically carried them for like a whole month and a half. And then there's just a little bit of a vibe to that team, a team that had all the worst vibes because frankly, their fan base overreacted. Let's just be real. Their fan base completely overreacted to not their team being bad, but this idea that it was over and they're back to being just like the Bernie Madoff era. And it's like, no, like Steve Cohen ain't falling for a Ponzi scheme, man. Like you're still good in that regard. And, you know, their pitching has been really good for a while now. And again, there's just something about it. Don't get me wrong, I would very greatly appreciate not playing at Citi Field. I think that would be a nice momentum boost for the Padres. But there is something about the Mets. There's something about that team with that offense that feels very, very legit. Similar to the D-backs, frankly. Honestly, kind of the exact same as the D-backs. That makes me a little bit more scared. I just think D-backs, they made it. They made a big run last year. It's not if they won the division, right? Mm-hmm. Then I might say that's different. But it's the same position as last year. And of course, now I'm going to look stupid and they're going to make the World Series again. And I'm going to be like, wait, what the heck? And everybody's going to be so mad at me for bringing this up. But I put the D-backs at 2 for now. That's number 1.
Man, same exact scenario playing out as last year, but we don't want to believe what our eyes are telling us, Javi. That's okay. Maybe the postseason will help update some information. But my list is very, very similar to yours. Again, Milwaukee, number 4. They're the least talented team, I think, also entering the postseason on paper. Like, I know statistically they look great, but I can't.
I'll believe it when I see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll believe it when we see it. Number 3 for me, like you said, the Braves. I mean, if they miss the postseason, like Chris Sale, he's the other guy of who's not having underperforming season, who's gonna win the Cy Young and maybe not even be in the playoffs, which would be crazy. And I don't know how they've underperformed. Like to get like 8 of your best guys just not be on their A game in their lineup. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, from Matt Olson to you just go up and down Austin Riley, and just like everyone is struggling. I don't know what's happened to them this season. And then I have a little bit more respect for your team because I'm going to have them at number one. Number two, I do have the New York Mets because they've been great, right, for the last couple months now, post
Mhm.
All-Star break. They've been on fire, but I can't help but feel like on paper, I don't love that team in terms of how they're built for the postseason. Like
Mhm.
it's hard for me to wrap my head around like Sean Manaea leading a rotation to the World
That's
Series,
fair. Yeah.
Luis Severino being like a game one starter for a deep postseason run. Like on
Mhm.
paper, they've statistically, like the Brewers, they've looked great. And I don't want to see the Mets because for some reason, the last few years, the Mets have owned the D-backs in the regular season. So I do not want to see the Mets in the playoffs. But if they go against someone else, I'll probably pick the other team against New York. Like if it's San Diego, New York, I'm definitely picking the Padres. And then number one, I have the Padres because I have respect for your team, Javi. Obviously, it's not reciprocated. That's okay. The Padres have immense amount of talent that they
Mhm.
paid for. Obviously, they paid a lot for some of their talent, but
Yes, they did.
Machado's having a little bit better of a season. Tatis, he's back, he's healthy off the
Yeah.
injured list, and I think that rotation is starting to get together. Musgrove start to heat up down the end of the season, down the end of the stretch of the season. Yu Darvish is back; he's starting to pitch better as well. Dylan C started to find his groove, so I just think. Plus, you have Michael King, like you mentioned. I think also that team is just so familiar with the D-backs. It's usually those Ha-Sing Kims and the Profars,
Mhm.
the Jiraxons, Javi, that usually kill
Yeah.
the D-backs. And so when I look at the Padres, it's not even the stars that scare me. It's all the guys on the margins because I feel like it's always
Mhm.
those guys that step up to the plate and kill Arizona. So I have the Padres with respect at number one. But who would you say is the team, quickly before we wrap up today, that has the most to lose if they missed out on the postseason?
If they miss out on the postseason, hmm, like, based on the standings right now,
Yeah,
I'd
basically
say
the like D-backs, Braves, Mets are your three options.
I think it depends. It depends on, like, your perspective on it, where it's like,
Mhm.
if you're a Braves fan, maybe you're like, "Hey, man, we won in 2021, like, things could be worse." I think that the Mets would be really disappointing after all of this time if they were to fall out of it. That would be really devastating. D-backs, kinda same thing. I'd say it's between those 2 teams, and then, frankly, I just think that in general, the whole maybe that's the next podcast we gotta do, is just who's gonna be the most disappointing if they were to get bounced early in all of MLB, because man, there's a lot of contenders for that because any of them can happen, right? So every single team can lose very, very quickly. I think this year, the Yankees. Do you want to see sports that are just cooking them nonstop? You know that's going to happen. So I'm excited for that. But I will say I think it's the Mets because of all that money being spent. It would
Yeah.
just be a real shame to like almost like a they faked you out. It was red herring. Like, just kidding. Lindor got hurt for the last like week and a half, and that's what you're not going to make it. So I could see that becoming a thing. While the Braves can count on the fact that, similar to last year's Padres, it's it's almost like, do you believe it? Do you believe that Austin Riley, Alzi Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, all these guys are not only going to be either not healthy or not as good, but that the Braves will find a way? There's just this feeling of we'll be back at it next year. Don't worry, we'll retool. As opposed to the Mets, where I think they'll still be an okay team. They still got good players on there, but it's not quite the same. It feels like there's a little bit of a flash in the pan, lightning in a bottle moment going for them right now.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think the D-backs have a strong argument for
Mhm,
this kind of discussion because the first year you finally have some expectations. Have you
mhm.
faltered down the stretch after being arguably the best team for like a 3-month period, having the best offense in the sport from the start to the finish? If all of a sudden you miss the postseason because of poor play the last 3 weeks, I think that'd be really disappointing. But at the end of the day, the New York Mets have the highest payroll in Major League Baseball, and one of their premier players, Pete Alonso, is an upcoming free agent. So if you miss the postseason, mixed in the opportunity that Pete Alonso could leave in free agency, I just think there's a lot at stake for New York Mets right now. Even though this is a team where I actually don't believe in like their World Series ceiling, like if they don't miss the postseason or if they don't make the playoffs, I'm not gonna be like, oh, that was a contender that just missed out. I actually don't love that team in terms of their on paper talent, but there's still so much invested in that roster. I still think it'd be a major disappointment if they miss the postseason. Any last minute departing thoughts before we leave today, Javi?
Yeah, not to mention Christian Walker being a free agent after the season, like one of the most underrated sluggers in the game right now. So yeah, I agree, man. It's a little bit of a toss up, but whatever happens, man, this playoffs, they might be special. They might be special, and I'm not just saying for our teams, just in general. There's something in the air. I smell it, man. There's something going. Yeah, I smell something, man.
Good smell?
I think we might get ourselves a little bit of a classic here, and not to mention
Oh,
we both hate him. It's kind of cool that Shohei Ohtani is going to make his playoff debut. Let's be
yeah.
honest, all right? And we're deep enough into the podcast that people might not hear it. So, but let's just be honest, it's really cool. The same way I would say the same thing if Mike Trout was on the Dodgers. It's just as a sports fan, it stinks to have best talent that it's not their fault. They're just completely languishing away. So, that's just kind of cool. So, good for them.
I think if the listeners want to know, are we going on the road to San Diego for D-backs Padres?
I mean, maybe we might
Oh.
have to if that were to happen because I won't be here like the beginning of October. So if the series were to happen, it would probably be after that. We might have to, man. We might have to. I don't think we have any choice. Hey, I got a friend in San Diego. He's got a place. So
Okay, we
might have to do it. We might have to do podcast live at the stadium. I don't know, man.
That'd be kind of hype. Can you
Yeah,
get
that would be kinda
credentials,
hype.
please? Can we please
I'll
get
try.
credentials?
Yeah, right. Can we please?
Can I please get a credential? That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover. Check out Locked On Diamondbacks wherever you stream your podcasting platforms. At CareerTimes24 for my personal account on Twitter, Millard.Thomas123 for the personal on Insta, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the show handle. Javi, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Javiipeno, Javiipeno, or at @LO_Padres, or my writing at Just Baseball, or my other podcast, Baseball versus the World. Go check that out. And if you're just a fan of like random pop culture writing, I actually have a piece coming out soon for a site that I'm working on, maybe sometime next week. So just keep it locked in on all my things I just mentioned.
One more series left. D-backs versus Padres. Padres still trying to take the NL West crown while the D-backs are just trying to make it to the postseason. What will happen? We'll check in next week. Javi, we'll catch you next time. And to the listeners, dose.